Just let you know, I'll make it start at 12 o'clock. Just let everyone get on. Right, so as that's 12 o'clock, I'll make a start. My name's David Watts, with Carney Consultancy, and I'll be presenting today's webinar on ladder safety on behalf of Working Well Together and Carney Consultancy. The information it's sourced from HSE website, the Ladder Association, and that's where the content's coming in. What I've done is I've muted everybody with the view that I'll take questions at the end, but I hope you find it useful. So I'll make a start. So in terms of today's session, what we're going to cover, obviously the hierarchy of safe working at height, the key question. I'll look at when ladders are appropriate, how to use ladders safely, and also what is expected of employers. And as a final kind of section, yes, we're going to discuss ladders. Yes, I'll discuss different safe systems of work, but actually, is there any alternatives? Can we avoid ladder use in the first instance? Can we avoid work at height in the first instance as well? So in terms of the key facts, 1.6 million work-related ill health cases, stress, which is health, but in general, it's the safety aspect of ladders. The key one that we're looking at is in the middle line, 111 fatal injuries to workers in 2019-2020. and also 65,000 plus non-fatal injuries reported under radar. And on the next slide, I will discuss how those are related to work at height, because a lot of them are. So there is a big loss. It is still a big issue. And in terms of the construction industry, it's still the biggest killer. So I mean, these figures are available online. So I'm not going to massively delve into them, but it's just kind of a brief one. The two middle ones, 111 fatal injuries and 65,427 non-fatal injuries reported by employers in 2019-2020. And this is where I was getting to. So in terms of the breakdown, there's 111 workers killed at work 2019-2020, and of those, 29 of them were caused by falls from height. If you actually then break it down into the construction industry, it's around half of the construction industry's deaths are caused by work at height. And with anything, what I always say is, yes, there's 29 falls from height that have resulted in deaths, but on top of that, how many of those have resulted in life-changing injuries where people might never walk again, people might never work again, and other various injuries that, yes, they may recover from them, but it's still potentially going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Even things like broken legs, obviously serious injuries, but can still continue to affect people after the injury, after they've recovered, and after they're supposedly healthy, but they might still have injuries that are going to affect them in the rest of their life. So yes, there's 29 on the record there, but for those 29, there's a lot more people that have had seriously life-changing injuries on top of that. And when you break it down again, the non-fatal injuries, it's around 8% of non-fatal injuries. So slips, trips and falls on the same level, representing 29% of that, but falls from height are still representing 8%. But when it comes to the serious injuries, for the deaths, work at height is a massive issue for all industries, but especially the construction industry. And it always has been. Thankfully, it has been coming down, but it's still there, it's still causing issues. And I'm sure everybody, whenever they're driving around or walking around the town centres, you still see things that are bad practice with work at height. People taking the chance, people looking at that roof and it'll be okay. Sometimes it is, but when it does go wrong, that's when the top figures, the 29 falls from height a year. That's 29 people not going home that night. So it is still an issue. It is still causing issues, and it is something that's to be focused on. And ladders are a key element of the work at height. There is alternatives, scaffolding, scissor lifts, and various other different items and plant equipment, but ladders are still used. Sometimes people think that they've been banned or they're made illegal, but they're not, but they should still be used correctly. So I'll click on the next. So in terms of the law, the purpose of the work at height regulations is to prevent death and injury caused by falls from height. So those employers, managers, or anybody in control of people who are working at height must make sure that the work is properly planned, supervised, and carried out by competent people. All I'd say is remember that sentence, because in the next couple of slides, there is a few cases that I've brought up and I'll use as examples. And the comments from the HSE are the work was not properly planned, wasn't supervised, persons may or may not be incompetent. And from that includes use of the right type of equipment for work at height. Obviously, the lower the risk, they might be more straightforward, they might require less effort, but they still should be planned. And when it does go wrong, when the wheels fall off, that is when we see issues, and we'll talk about these in the next couple of slides. So all those in control, managers, supervisors, directors, the employer must first assess these risks. and sometimes people can kind of lose track of what is actually work at height. Is there a distance? Is there a minimum height? Well, there isn't. The definition is any height where there's potential for a fall. So no 2 meters, or if you're under 2 meters, it's not work at height. None of that. It is any height where there's potential for an injury to be caused. So work at height, if you're working on a ladder on a flat roof, you could fall through a fragile surface. So you might be at roof level, or you might be on something that is flat, but if it's fragile, there's potential for you to fall through it. And also something that is overlooked is an opening in the floor, hole in the ground, and excavation. And what I'll always say to people on training courses is, if you fall 4 meters off a flat roof onto the floor, you land on the concrete, the ambulance is going to turn up and hopefully help you if you've survived. But if you fell into an excavation, yes, the ambulance turns up and tries to help you, but the first concern is getting you out of the hole and getting you back up to ground level to then start helping you. So in some cases, an excavation can be worse when it comes to falls from height. It's still the same 4 meter hole, but it's now a case of how do you get the person out before you start treating them. And that is something that's quite overlooked sometimes. People will have scaffold, handrails, etc. But when it comes to excavations, it can sometimes people can sometimes go for things like crowd barriers, which can segregate the work area, but they're not going to they're not going to prevent a fall if somebody leans against it or falls against it. So in terms of the law, the management should ensure that every work task that could potentially result in such falls are either avoided entirely. So the key one to think about is, can the work at height be avoided? And that's all, and that applies to things like COSH as well. So can the substance be avoided? It's always the first question, can we avoid it? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Example, things like window cleaners, the reach and wash system. It's avoiding work at height, it's avoiding that person needing to go up a ladder. But it's not practical in all senses. So if you can't avoid it, the work should be properly planned by a competent person, appropriately supervised, and then carried out in a safe manner. That includes limiting, either preventing the fall distance, preventing the fall in the first instance, limiting the fall distance, and altogether reducing the risks and providing control measures. So when it comes to the work at height regulations, Regulation 7 will detail that you should select work equipment for the work at height task, and it must be suitable and appropriate for the work that's been taking place. When you're taking that into account, you must take into account such factors such as the working conditions. Where is the work taking place? Is it outside, inside? Is it windy? What's the ground conditions like? The nature and the frequency and duration of the task. So how often are you going to be doing this? Is it going to be once a year, once a week? 10 times a day? You're looking at the frequency and the duration of the task. So again, the frequency, but when it comes to duration, how long is the work task lasting? Is it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 4 hours? And from that, that's when you're building the picture of what access equipment might be suitable. And also you've got to consider the risks to everybody that's using the work equipment, but also people in the vicinity as well. Who's below? Are the people working below potentially? With the key point being that you should always provide collective measures over personal protective measures. So when we talk about these, and then you apply them back to ladders, where is there an issue? So again, we'll discuss that in a little bit. But just to kind of, I spoke on the last couple of slides about accidents, prosecutions, etc. And I've pulled up a couple of examples here. So these are freely available on the internet. I have changed the names in terms of hidden company identities. However, Carlisle magistrates highlighted the fact and importance of ensuring that work at height. In both these accidents, involving ladders. So an employee suffered a serious elbow injury after falling 2 meters from a ladder when it failed when he was inspecting a steam leak. So 2 meters up, so not not a great height, but still a height. Serious elbow injuries suffered, and the HSE got involved. So we'll go back to the first couple of slides. The HSE found that the company had failed to ensure that the work at height was properly planned and managed, and they also failed to ensure that the equipment provided was inspected at regular intervals and was fit for use. So there'd been no planning, or very little planning, and also they hadn't inspected the equipment, and the equipment subsequently failed. So they pled guilty, and the company was fined 120,000 with another 5,000 plus in costs. So there's one prosecution, £125,000 for someone falling off a ladder. So it's a big fine. Remember, the fines will be linked to turnover of the company, and how culpable they were found to be. Second one, school trust. So February 2019, injured person working on an unsecured ladder at the school to dismantle the canopy roof. The ladder slipped, and the worker fell and sustained fractures to his face, fractured femur, and other injuries. So again, HSE investigated. No risk assessment or safe system of work for dismantling the canopy roof. No assessment made of the fragility of the roof before assessing it. Remember, he didn't fall through it, but it's still taken into account. Suitable equipment wasn't provided, so potentially what they might be looking at is, was a ladder the most suitable method of work there? The injured person wasn't trained, and the work wasn't supervised. So again, going back to the first couple of slides, we're looking at, in both situations, poor planning, people not trained, incorrect use of work equipment, and many more. So again, the investigation found that other work. So again, not only was the issue where the person had fell from a ladder from this canopy roof, they also looked at other work that the school had done or was currently doing. So again, further work without specific planning, supervision, and wasn't carried out safely. So again, they were fined, but they were fined £24,000 plus 5,000. So again, slightly lower cost, but again, that usually comes down to being like an educational trust, not for profit. So the fines will often be a little bit lower because of that. And then the final one, this one is unfortunately fatality. So, but the company, a bakery was fined £1 million after a self-employed contractor died when he fell from a stepladder. So that's not one of their employees, and I suppose when you think about it, and if you've got work being done in your offices, that's potentially the fire alarm contractor or the person servicing the boiler or any task like that. So the worker was a self-employed contractor carrying out electrical work at the company's site. So again, they brought an external contractor in to do some electrical works. And yeah, this could quite easily be a contractor that you bring into your offices. So they were wiring a motor above a machine while standing on a step ladder. The company had agreed the work activity could be completed using a step ladder, and they had provided it. The employee fell from the step ladder and suffered a fatal injury. So again, we go back to the first couple of slides. They failed to properly plan the activity from the beginning, including arrangements for installation of motors to use to carry out the work activity. So again, pleaded guilty, and they were fined £1 million plus £30,000 in costs. So there's a few examples, varying different fines, varying different situations, but all three of them were linked to ladder use and subsequently accidents happening through incorrect use of ladders. But sometimes what people can say is, our ladders are banned. They're not banned under health and safety law. They can be sensible, they can be a practical option for low risk, short duration works, but they shouldn't be the first choice. So if you're making sure that you're using the right type of ladder and you know how to use it safely, and there is guidance for employers on the simple, sensible precautions that you should take. But again, making sure that when they're using lean-in ladders or step ladders in the workplace, they should be planning the work. But the first question is, firstly, can the work at height be avoided? But secondly, is there a better alternative? Because when you look at the hierarchy of controls for work at height, step 1, avoid work from height. Step 2, preventing falls from occurring. Step 3, preventing falls by providing collective protection. Step 4, preventing falls using personal protection. Step 5, minimize the distance or consequences of fall using collective protection. And step 6, minimize the distance and or consequences of the fall using personal protection. So when you look at a step ladder or a ladder, does any of those really apply? Because if you're using a step ladder, does it avoid working at height? Well, no, because you're working at height. It doesn't prevent the fall from occurring. It's not existing safe place of work. And it doesn't prevent falls by providing collective protection. It doesn't necessarily provide falls by personal protection. It doesn't minimize the distance or consequences of fall using collective protection. And it doesn't minimize the distance of the fall using personal protection. So again, you can use them, but you should be considering, do we need to use them? Are they the right option? Because it can be perfectly suitable equipment, but when is it? The law does say that ladders can be used for work at height when a risk assessment has shown that the equipment offering the higher level of fall protection is not justified because of the low risk and short duration, or there is existing workplace features which can't be altered. It's not just short duration. It shouldn't just be, it's not the deciding factor whether an activity is acceptable. You've got to consider the risk. So if your task would require staying up on a lean ladder or step ladder for more than 30 minutes at a time, you really should be looking at alternative equipment. And really should be only used where they can be used safely, where the ladder will be level and stable, and where it's reasonably practicable to do so, and if possible, and also the ladder can be secured. But when you look at 30 minutes, that's not just that's generally 30 minutes. So again, there's potential where people have kind of pushed and said, oh well, I'm painting a balcony, it's only going to take 20 minutes, so a ladder is suitable. Well, you could possibly argue that, but if there's 10 balconies to paint, well, yes, one is 20 minutes, but if you've got 10, that's 200 minutes. So it's got to be taking into account the full scale of the operation, the full scale of the project, the full scale of the job, to make sure that actually is the ladder the most suitable method of work. So it should be for low risk and also short duration. So who can use a ladder at work? If somebody's using a ladder, they must be competent to do so, or they should be trained and they should be working under the supervision of a competent person. So competency can be demonstrated through various different methods: training, practical and theoretical knowledge, and also experience. And again, should be appropriate for the task, and it should include how to assess the risk of the ladder for a particular task, when it is right to use a ladder and when it's not. So again, it's not just this is the situation when you can use a ladder. You should also be looking at the situation when it's not suitable to use a ladder, and which type of ladder should they use and how to use it, but also which type of ladder have they been trained on as well. So before you or somebody else is using a ladder, they should have access to the instructions from the manufacturer. Pre-use check to spot any visual defects, so making sure the ladder is safe to use. The pre-use check should be carried out by the user at the beginning of the workday, and if something has changed, so the ladder's been dropped, it's fell off the roof rack when you're taking it off, for example, or it's moved from a dirty area to a clean area, making sure the condition of the feet's in suitable condition. So you're looking at the styles, so making sure that they're not bent or damaged, and as the ladder could buckle or collapse. The feet, make sure they're not missing. If they're damaged or worn, the ladder could slip. Make sure the ladder's feet, when moving from a soft, dirty ground, so for example, soil, loose sandstone, or a dirty workshop, to a smooth, solid surface, for example, paving slabs, make sure that it's the actual feet that the ladder's been rested on. It's not the dirt or soil or chippings or anything that's been embedded within them. That's making contact with the ground, because again, you're going to lose friction there. The rungs, if they're bent, missing or loose, the ladder could fail. The locking mechanism, Does the mechanism work properly? Are the components or fixings bent, worn, or damaged? Again, if so, the ladder could quite easily collapse. Ensure any locking bars are fully engaged, and then the step ladder platform, is it split, buckled? Again, all these can make it unstable or collapse. And the steps or the tread, if they're contaminated, they could be slippy. If the fixings are loose, they could collapse. And if you spot any of the above defects, the ladder should not be used, and making sure you're notifying your employer. So they're the kind of things that somebody should be looking at if they're using a ladder. But again, as a company, are you training somebody? If you're giving somebody a ladder, are you telling them that's what they need to look for? Yes, you're going to be doing it, but when you hand that ladder to them, you might not see them for 2 months if they're out on the road, for example. Are they checking it? And are they documenting it? And are they providing them documented evidence to you yourselves as a company as well? So again, making sure that you're looking at the daily pre-use check, including the feet, making sure that before they use it, is the space to fully open the ladder? Making sure that there's locking devices, the ground's firm and level. It should be clean but not slippy. Again, going back to short duration work and light work. Shouldn't be carrying more than 10 kilos really up a ladder. Making sure people aren't working off the top 2 steps or top 3 for a swing back or a double step ladder. Avoid side-on working and making sure people aren't overreaching. So again, it can be quite easy if you're working on a ladder. If you're doing a task, I'll just reach for the next one. I'll just reach for the next one. It's making sure that they're aware that actually come down, move the ladder. Because again, it's quite easy to overstretch. And a guide for that would be making sure that your belt buckle is staying within the stiles and you're keeping both feet on the same rung or the step throughout the task. Ladders, again, making sure there's a pre-use check, including the feet, making sure it's secured and the ground should be firm and level. Having a strong upper resting point. So again, it's not ladder, it's not plastic guttering, for example. The floor should be clean and not slippy. Going back to it again, short duration work, light work, and the angle should be 75 degrees. So 1 unit out for every 4 units up. Making sure that gripping the ladder when you're climbing, you're not working off the top 3 rungs, as this provides a high handhold. And again, making sure you're not overreaching and using the belt buckle is a good example of that. So ladder safety in general. So going back to that, the firm level ground, making sure that we're looking at the manufacturer's pictograms on the side of the ladder. We're using proper leveling devices, not ad hoc packing such as bricks or blocks or timber, for example. When we're talking about clean solid surfaces, the paving slabs of the floors, they should be clean. So no oil, moss or leaf litter, and also free from loose materials, so sand, packaging, cardboard. So again, that there's a good grip. And sometimes shiny surfaces can be quite slippy without even any contamination. Again, thinking about where the ladder is, you don't want to be struck by a forklift or any other type of vehicle. Protect that area using suitable barriers or cones. Make sure it's not going to be pushed over by other hazards. So if a door opens, is it going to hit the ladder? So it might be a case of securing the door, so as long as it isn't a fire exit or the window. But that's going to have to be properly planned. You go back to this section, are we properly planning the work? So are we making sure that traffic's potentially diverted? And by traffic, that could be person traffic as well. Or you might have to use someone standing at the base and warning people. So what about the condition? So again, an employer needs to make sure that any ladder or step ladder that they're using is suitable for the work task and in a safe condition before use. So again, making sure we're only using ladders or step ladders that have no visible defects, but again, covered in the pre-use check sheet. Make sure there's an up-to-date record of detailed visual inspections, and this should be done by a competent person, but also in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. That they're suitable for the use, are they strong and robust enough for the job, and have they been maintained or stored in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So again, just a couple of photos, damaged damaged rungs, etc., the feet missing. So anything that's picked up should be recorded and reported back to the employer, and the ladder shouldn't be used until it's been replaced or repaired if possible. But generally with aluminium ladders, once they're bent, once they're damaged, they ended up in the bin or the scrap and they'll be replaced. So in terms of step ladders, so again, what else we're looking for? Damaged or worn ladder feet, twisted, bent stiles, cracked or worn, bent, loose rungs, tie rods missing or damaged, or damaged weld joints, loose rivets, or damaged stays. So again, a few examples of different issues that have been picked up, and sometimes they can be quite subtle. It can be quite a small defect, but it can still cause an issue. It can still cause failure. So it's a case of checking and ensuring that any issues like that are picked up. So in terms of the standard, there was the old standard, class 3, class 1 and EN 131. So there was industrial and trade and industrial and domestic. The current standard is just EN 131 and it's split into non-professional and professional. Non-professional, domestic use only. Professional, intended for use in the workplace. Total max load is usually 150 kilos. Some of them may be higher on the professional, but remember, it isn't a retrospective piece of legislation. So again, as long as the ladders or equipment's in good order, they don't need to be changed. But generally, what you'll find is when you buy new equipment, you'll find it's to the new standard. So all ladders now should be designed to the manufacturer at the current EN 131 standard only. There's an example. Obviously, the non-professional, they're generally a lot thinner. There's a lot less to them. But the professional use, again, so if they're being used in the workplace, you need to have they need to be professional grade, or going back a slide, industrial standard if they're an older set of ladders. As long as they're in good condition, they don't need to be replaced with the new standards. It would just be a case of when they eventually wear out or they're lost, etc. That's when they'll be replaced and they'll be to the new professional standard. And I'll just cover briefly some different kind of ladder safety systems that you may kind of come across. There's Tetra and other safety systems. So again, with these, first thing to kind of be that is massively important is this a suitable way of working? Is the work planned? Are the people trained, for example? So with this, it's use of harnesses, securing devices. Sometimes it might be for lone working, but there's a means of securing the ladder. The use of harness for fall prevention or working from the ladder. So things like satellite dish installations and things like that, where people are working from a ladder, but they're using different types of safety systems, like the one in the picture. But again, needs to be specialist training, should be a rescue plan, but also forms of harness inspections as well. And you'll also see that the ladder is secured via an eye bolt. So again, you might use an eye bolt to secure ladders, making sure they're fully screwed into the plug before it can attach the ladder. They might use a carabiner between the strap and the eye bolt to prevent wear and tear on the strap. But again, suitable hole drilled into suitable brick to a depth where the entire plug can be inserted. But again, how's that being done? What's the manufacturer's instructions? And these are things that must be considered before looking at work like this. So for the eye bolt, the person should be identified in a suitable location for the hole, center the brick where possible, generally drilled to a depth of at least 60 mil. However, that's going to be dictated by the manufacturer. Some manufacturers might say 80 mil, for example. And also they'll specify the drill bit size. So it might be a 6 mil drill bit, an 8 mil drill bit, and a suitable wall plug, red or brown, etc. Making sure the correct wall plugs inserted and securing it in the hole fully, and make sure the eye bolt's turned into the hole fully before it's used. Making sure it's flush with the water surface, and also check that it's fully secure before attaching any equipment. The removal, making sure nothing's obviously attached to it, turning it anti-clockwise and removing the eye bolt. And generally you might, if you're finished with it, you might be a case of also sealing the hole with like a silicone as well. If people are wearing harnesses, again, harness inspection comes into play as well. So this falls under pure regulations, and what again, the equipment must be suitable for its intended use, correctly maintained, and the person unit must be trained in its safe and correct use. So when it comes to inspection recommendations, it should only be used for fall arrest, not lifting and lowering, and there should be formal and detailed inspections every 6 months as per INDG 367. But again, you should be looking at weekly record inspections carried out by the operatives as part of their inspections, and also a daily visual inspection carried out before any use. So a couple of examples there: pre-use check every time before use, detailed inspection at least every 6 months. It might be even 3 months for frequently used equipment. It might be even less. It might be even less time scale, depending on how the equipment's used. But again, that's going to be risk assessed and depending on how your company's using this equipment. And also competent person inspections. And again, the frequency is going to depend on use. So a few pictures of basically examples of pictures of ladders being used incorrectly. Obviously, the 2 people on that ladder carrying massive amount of equipment. There's no segregation below. If that person at the top drops the tiles, for example, it's going to seriously injure, if not kill, the person below. There's a lot going wrong with things like that. So the next few slides are just kind of pictures of poor practice that you may see or you may have seen. And I'm sure everybody listening at some point has seen some poor practice with ladders. It might be the neighbour, it might be somebody that's driving down the road when they see it. There's very different examples, but there's a few different pictures. So again, step ladder leaning against a wall, scaffold boards being used to kind of balance on that on the staircase, roof work. So again, something like that should have a full scaffold. So when you're looking at something like that, it's not a case of all the ladders are being used incorrectly. You need to take a step back from that, and it's the fact that actually ladders aren't the correct equipment in the first place. And sometimes subtle things. So again, top of a staircase, they're not on firm level ground. So again, potential for something to go wrong there. And again, incorrect use of step ladders, they're not fully opened out. Someone's using them to get extra height, and basically there's quite a good chance that could slip out from below. Another stock example as well, leant against a pallet on a forklift. Again, would there be the most suitable solution in the first place? Well, no. Really, the question we should be looking at is, can we avoid ladder use altogether? And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Obviously, I've covered what you should be considering when it comes to ladder use, but actually the further back is obviously, can we avoid work at height? But then the next step is there better equipment for the task? So things like cherry pickers, scissor lifts, podium scaffolds, hop-up type delta decks kind of thing, mobile scaffold towers. All, if you can get them into the place, they will be more suitable than a step ladder. But how you use the step, they're not banned, but it's having that serious consideration to think about before you use them. So kind of conclusions, what should be considered before we use a step ladder or a ladder? And the first question is it the most suitable form of equipment? Who can use a ladder at work? Are they trained, are they competent, for example? Who's going to be inspecting the ladder and other related equipment? Can we use it safely? Considering where it's going to be used, what different methods we've got of securing the ladder. Are the ladders just being used for access onto another place of work? And also finally, the condition of the equipment. Is it in good condition? Is it damaged? if it's poor condition, again, it shouldn't be used. So a bit more further information. There's the Ladder Association, there's safety step ladders and step ladders, a brief guide, work at height regulations, and a few other kind of further reading. So work at height safely, a brief guide. So INDG 401, health and safety and roof work, HSG 33, safety guidance on portable ladders from the Ladder Association, safety guidance on telescopic ladders from the Ladder Association, work at height web pages. There's a vast amount of information there. And also the Ladder Association have also provided guidance on the selection of use of ladders. And that's kind of a final part of it. So I'll just push it back to any questions. What I'll do is I'll stop the share.